Did you see this year's Super Bowl halftime show? You might be thinking you've seen this video before. Unfortunately, that was removed due to copyright, so I've edited the necessary parts and I'm trying this again. I explained a bit about how to understand Bad Bunny like a Puerto Rican linguist. There aren't a lot of Puerto Rican linguists, let alone ones that regularly make educational content, so I don't want to let the information and message of that video just die like that, but I can't afford the risk of legal action just to reinstate it. So if you watched the first time, thank you for that. It would mean so much to me if you could give this video the same support you did that one. Just let it play in the background as you take a shower or something, please. Did you see this year's Super Bowl halftime show? Not that lip syncing crap that Hispanophobes couldn't even play on Daddy Musk's Twitter takeover. I mean the real one that, despite the competing show and whining from the president of the most powerful country on earth, went on to become the most watched Super Bowl halftime show ever. And now you want to learn to understand it like a Puerto Rican. So as a linguist and Puerto Rican myself, I am here to translate and give some insight into what Bad Bunny's performance means to us. Things you may have missed even if you're a fluent or native speaker of Spanish, as well as some other things that I find linguistically really cool about his music. I'm not asking you to love his music if you don't already, but hopefully I can at least give you an appreciation for the meanings and why Bad Bunny is the biggest artist in the world, even though he doesn't appeal to a worldwide audience like many English language pop artists. Let's start with the beginning of his halftime show. He opens with one of his most popular songs ever.
Ey, Tití Me Preguntó si tengo mucha novia. Ey.
Titled Tití Me Preguntó. ¿Pero te has preguntado quién es Tití? I've lived in Colombia and now Ecuador, and I've met Spanish speakers in and from even more countries, and I've asked if they know who Tití from the song is, and nobody I've asked has ever known the answer. Now, it wasn't an academically rigorous study or anything like that, but still, non-Puerto Ricans usually don't use that word. Yet even though I didn't grow up speaking Spanish and don't have a Puerto Rico accent, yes, unfortunately, I was a no Sabo kid. Some of my first words were Puerto Rican Spanish because my mom would use those words, and I might not have even learned the English word until years later. So I immediately knew who Titi was because I have that person in my family. It's a word used in Puerto Rico for aunt, a variation on tía. That's why the music video starts like this.
Tú tienes muchas novias, ¿verdad? ¿Cuántas novias tú tienes?
Titi, yo tengo como 3 novias en la escuela.
I can't say that nobody else uses that word in other countries, but it's definitely nowhere near as common. I haven't heard it in any other country, and it has basically replaced tía in Puerto Rico. For some older Puerto Ricans, it may have also meant tío, uncle, but today that's not so common. And for my Puerto Rican uncles, I say tío. But for my aunts, even to this day, even when I didn't speak Spanish, I always and only called them titi. So the title in English would kind of be like, Auntie Asked Me. It's not the so-called standard word for aunt, but it's the same thing. So that's just a nice little Puerto Rican vocabulary for you, but what about a deeper meaning? Let's fast forward in the show a bit to find this.
Quieren quitarme el río y también la playa, quieren el barrio mío y que abuelita se vaya.
This is Ricky Martin, another famous Puerto Rican musician, singing Bad Bunny's song Lo que pasó a Hawaii, which means what happened to Hawaii. So what does this song have to do with Puerto Rico? Well, what is Puerto Rico? An island nation that became a U.S. territory. And what is Hawaii? An island nation that became a U.S. territory and eventually a U.S. state. If you don't know much about Hawaiian history, what the song is referring to is about how Anglo-Saxon Americans, especially wealthy Americans and corporations, took control of Hawaii. When Hawaii was independent in the 1800s, U.S. sugar planters and investors gained increasing control over Hawaii's economy and foreign relations, obviously favoring the USA. Then in 1893, white American businessmen and lawyers overthrew Queen Liliuokalani and asked for U.S. annexation. It took a few years with U.S. politicians not coming to an agreement before they finally annexed Hawaii in 1898, becoming a territory in 1900, then a state in 1959. And it's important to know that, but the song is also about modern Hawaii too. Hawaii has more and more mainland Americans and corporations going there who are usually wealthier than the local indigenous Hawaiians, buying up property, land, beachfront, controlling their economy, gentrifying Hawaii, and pricing out the Hawaiians. And now much of the same is happening in Puerto Rico. Wealthy Americans and corporations are moving there, increasing the cost of living, gentrifying and pricing out Puerto Ricans, which is why the lyrics go like this.
No, no, suelte la bandera, ni olvide el lelolai, que no quiero que hagan contigo lo que le pasó a Hawaii.
So many are leaving Puerto Rico in search of higher paying jobs in the States, leaving their beaches, which just makes it easier for more wealthy people and corporations to buy more property and beachfront that Puerto Ricans can no longer access, exemplified in these lyrics.
Quieren quitarme el río y también la playa, quieren el barrio mío y que abuelita se vaya.
So now let's lighten the mood a little bit and talk about a song that wasn't in the show, but that I really love and think is underrated, this 2023 album opener.
El habla no da decline, a ti te escriben todo, eres siempre han sido ay.
What I find really interesting about this part of the song is that he's still saying all these lines almost entirely in Spanish, but then making the final rhyming words in English. I think it takes a pretty clever writer to make sure that all works, although he's definitely not the only person to use English lyrics in other language music, especially today, but the extent to which he does it I find really skilled.
Si en WhatsApp hablamos lo mejor all time, te sacamos del group chat, te dejamos offline.
He's writing a line in Spanish that leads up to English words that not only rhyme, but also would still make sense in the sentence if they were in Spanish, and are also common enough that the average Latino listener will still be able to understand even though it's not Spanish.
Y usted haciendo story time. Huh. Ya no estoy mi peak, ahora estoy mi prime.
Compare that to something where they often use whole English sentences for a bit, taking advantage of the freedom you have by making entire lines in the same language. Which is its own skill for a writer that deserves respect, but I think you can see as having more leeway because you're not trying to sync the meanings and rhythms of two languages in a single line, rhyming across multiple lines. Now back to the halftime show, this part here. This is his song El Apagón, which means the power outage. And as you can see, he's climbing power line poles. The point is to call out frequent power outages in Puerto Rico, which are often criticized by locals as the US government not doing enough or spending enough to improve the infrastructure of a US territory. The government is benefiting from what Puerto Rico provides to the states, but leaving it behind the states. Another interesting note is the flag he waves here. I also want to give a shout out to the cameraman and director here because this is an immaculate shot. But anyway, you'll notice the flag here has a relatively light blue, like the one on my shirt here. Contrast that to the flag you'll see at the end of the show, which has a darker blue, kind of like the one in this hat. The lighter blue is much older, being used even back in the 1800s during the period of Spanish control. The dark blue came out in the 1950s to align more with the US flag. And as such, the color used is often used to represent political opinions, with the lighter blue being used by folk who are more pro-independence or at least more pro-autonomy, even used for that expression in the Spanish imperial era before it became a US territory. The darker blue is now used by government and often used to express pro-statehood. I want to take one more look at NADIE SABE. A little bit later in the song, after we hear the English rhymes, we hear these rhymes.
Y la habla no da decline, a ti te escriben todo, eres siempre han sido ay.
If you're not familiar with Spanish, this may not seem special, but what I want you to understand is that these rhymes wouldn't exist in any other Spanish accent, at least that I know of. See, Puerto Ricans have this phonetic change that leads to an R sound changing to an L sound. Not the double R like perro. You may have heard that many Puerto Rican accents do also have a change for the double R, but that's a different process. That's not what I want you to understand about these particular lyrics. What we're looking at here is the single tap or flap R, like in perro. It's the same sound that Americans often use in place of a double T or a double D, like in the words batty. I'm not actually pronouncing a duh or ta sound in either of those. They both have an allophonic variation, which means a change in a specific context, turning into the alveolar tap ra, articulated in the same place as T and D, the alveolar ridge, just behind your teeth, just quicker and therefore easier to pronounce, which is why your tongue likes to do it, and why it's such a common sound in many of the world's languages, which is what a single R in the middle of a word usually represents in Spanish.
Yo no soy Daddy Yankee, yo no soy Don Omar, yo soy Bad Bunny, Mama Bicho, yo no soy normal.
In a Puerto Rican accent, they still use the regular tapped R, ra, in between vowels. But before a consonant or at the end of a word, that alveolar tap has an allophonic variation. It turns into an alveolar lateral approximant, aka ul. See, the only difference between that tap ra and ul is that the tap, by definition, only taps the alveolar ridge. The only thing you need to do to change ra to ul is to hold on to it and let air out the sides.
Hay mucha gente deseando que me vaya mal, tristemente a esa gente le toca mamar.
The phonotactics here, or the rules for when certain sounds are pronounced certain ways in contexts, are that in between vowels you have to release that articulation so the tap doesn't change, because the following vowel won't have that articulation anyway. But when it's followed by another consonant that has some kind of articulation, or at the end of a word where you're not going to need to release that articulation to pronounce the following vowel, it's just easier for your tongue to not let go of that tap, thus turning it into ul.
Que abre todo el cabrón que quiera hablar, el que no sabe el cuento siempre lo quiere contar.
So he uses that unique feature of Puerto Rican accents to make words that rhyme with a single R rhyme with words with an L, which would not rhyme for any other Spanish accents. But not only that, at the end of this set of rhymes, he hits us with this line.
Las termino con la L, con la R suena mal, sin cojones me tiene la fama, nunca va a cambiar.
I finished them with an L because with an R it sounds bad. He's literally describing the phonetic and phonotactic features of a Puerto Rican accent as a line in the song and using that feature to rhyme not only other lines, but also to rhyme the very line where he's describing those phonetic features and telling you that that's what he's doing. This is something that I have never heard in any other song before. If you know of any other examples doing all that at once, let me know because that shit is banger. Now back to one final moment of the halftime show I want to explain linguistically. This time it's about semantics and the meaning of the song that closed his performance.
Ahora sí. De cuando te tuve.
Debí tirar más fotos, which means I should have taken more photos. A lot of people use this song in social media posts about summer vacation, including to Puerto Rico. But when white people use this song for their photos from an Airbnb in Puerto Rico, they think it's being nicely nostalgic of their trip. But Puerto Ricans find it extremely ironic because, again, this song is about the gentrification of Puerto Rico. Yes, it's about enjoying good times while they last, past love, but it's also about enjoying Puerto Rico before Puerto Ricans can no longer enjoy it. That's why the lyrics are about enjoying things that those who left are missing out on.
Otra sonce bonito que veo en San Juan, disfrutando de todas esas cosas que extrañan los que se van.
And about wishing people would stay and not leave because so many Puerto Ricans have left after being priced out.
Ey, ojalá que los míos nunca se muden.
In fact, there are more ethnic Puerto Ricans on the US mainland than there are in Puerto Rico. Recent estimates say there's over 1 million people of Puerto Rican ancestry in and around New York City alone. That's about 1/3 of the population of Puerto Rico. My abuelos, my grandparents, were 2 of those who left for New York City. That's why Puerto Rican culture is so strongly tied to New York City, shown by this bodega at the halftime show, and why he has a song in the same album that he also performed called
NUEVAYoL.
aka New York in Puerto Rican. That's also why the album cover is 2 empty plastic chairs. Sitting in these chairs and just talking to your family and friends is something so Puerto Rican that even a New Jersey-born no sabo kid like me has done that countless times. But they're empty because they symbolize the Puerto Ricans who have left to find themselves a better life elsewhere that's getting harder to achieve in Puerto Rico because of gentrification. And gentrification is a problem that exists in some of the earliest ancient city records. There's probably no true solution, at least as long as there's growing population and people moving to new places. But the thing about Puerto Rico is that it's a small island. It's not like moving to another city in Texas or the mainland US where there's almost limitless land and space for new development. Puerto Rico is far more finite. New housing is almost always at the cost of old housing. New developments are almost always on the same plots of old neighborhoods. As more wealthy folks from the States move to Puerto Rico for tax cuts and can afford big houses, smaller houses that Puerto Ricans can afford are going away, and with them, Puerto Ricans. This is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to understanding Bad Bunny like a Puerto Rican. I've got a few more things to say, so please don't go yet, but let me say now, thank you for watching and appreciating what Puerto Ricans have to offer. If you enjoyed this, give it a like and share. If you want to see more analysis and explanation of media like this, whether it's linguistic or cultural, Bad Bunny or other Puerto Rican stuff, American stuff, or even movies or anything else I might be able to teach a bit about, let me know in the comments and subscribe for more. One more linguistic thing to see here is that he mentions all of the countries in the Americas and says, together we are America. Because in the Hispanic culture, they don't view North and South America as separate continents. They consider it all one continent called America, which I've talked about before, but I don't want to start any arguments here. All you need to know is that America means different things to different people, and that using it to refer to the US or a toda America are both correct. To finish, a quick fire look at cultural things that this halftime show did while the other halftime show had a fake string performance and Kid Rock just bounced around as his voice played from a speaker, and Bad Bunny got orders of magnitude more views with real live string players. First, the hats are traditional Puerto Rican hats called baba, worn by farmers who work a lot of sugarcane fields. Then the fact that this is a real club owner and Bad Bunny celebrated his album release there to help her stay in business. A lot of the other stands and businesses in the set and cast were real Latino vendors and business people from cities all across the US. The kid sleeping across a few chairs at a party, every Hispanic kid has been that kid. I love that one. This is a traditional Puerto Rican style house based on a specific real house. This was a real wedding. And this kid at the end seeing that Latinos can do anything. And there's probably even more stuff in his music and performances that I wouldn't be the right person to explain because I didn't grow up on the island. So if you're interested in learning more, don't just follow me, follow Puerto Ricans born and raised in Puerto Rico who can tell you even more. Look, I don't talk about Bad Bunny the same way I talk about Mon Laferte or Ray because he doesn't have the voice of an angel like they do, alright? Nobody thinks he has the best pipes in the world, okay? And sure, even if you appreciate what I've said here, not everybody's gonna like his type of music. No type of music is liked by everyone. But what he means to us is just beyond what so many artists ever achieve. This show supported small local businesses. It was all about bringing people together and sharing love. He said, God bless America, one of the most pro-American phrases ever. And they literally had a real wedding. Like, the only people who shouldn't like this show, or at least appreciate the message, are people who don't like when other people are different from them. He really means that much to so many people, and they all really did that performance. Damn, bro, I'm getting chills just talking about it. Being Puerto Rican now is such a high, dude. Like, before Bad Bunny, we had our celebs and success stories, but now we're up here, bro. Puerto Rico is on top of the world right now. Oh my gosh, I love diversity, mi gente latino. So with that, I'll close out with my usual. Every accent, every dialect, every language, the way everybody speaks around the world, no matter what they look or sound like, are all equally valid and beautiful. And go home with Bad Bunny's message.